I spent months helping my sister plan her dream wedding, thousands of dollars, endless nights, every detail done with love. And then, just weeks before the ceremony, Mom looked me straight in the eye and said, "We've decided not to invite you to the wedding." No warning. No reason. Just a cold smile like I'd never mattered. That's when I realized my mom wasn't just cutting me out of a guest list. She wanted me gone for good, and she made sure everyone saw me as the villain. But what happened next flipped her perfect story upside down. My name's Emily Carter. I'm 34, and I've always been the dependable older sister, especially when it came to Hannah. Growing up, we were practically glued at the hip, sharing secrets, dreams, and endless late-night talks. So when she got engaged, I was over the moon to be asked to be her maid of honor. I poured thousands of dollars, countless hours, and my whole heart into helping her plan the perfect wedding. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that family dynamics aren't always straightforward, especially when Mom, Elaine, insists on steering the ship. Never in a million years did I think she'd look me straight in the eyes and say something that would break my heart. If you're someone going through family chaos right now, stick around. This story might give you a little strength to hold on to. And if it resonates, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe. Being Hannah's big sister meant stepping into the role of her guide, her protector, her built-in best friend. I was there for everything from teaching her how to tie her shoes to coaching her through high school heartbreaks. I was her steady hand, always just a call away. Our mom, Elaine, didn't exactly keep her favoritism under wraps. Hannah was the star, charming, creative, always the center of attention, while I was the grounded one constantly told to loosen up. And Dad? Brian mostly hovered in the background, avoiding conflict whenever Mom pushed things too far. As the eldest, I naturally became the family's go-to fixer. When the roof started leaking, I was the one arranging the repair. When bills piled up, I'd quietly dip into my own savings to make ends meet. That pattern didn't change over the years. Even in adulthood, I found myself stepping in, like when Hannah's art history degree needed funding and Mom and Dad fell short. I'd carved out a successful career as a financial consultant at a top-tier firm in Boston. It wasn't lost on me that while I was managing million-dollar portfolios by day, I was still expected to balance my family's checkbook behind the scenes. But I didn't mind. Helping Hannah chase her passion genuinely made me happy. 4 years ago, she met Marcus Bennett at an art gallery opening, and I could tell right away, he was the one. He came from money but never flaunted it. What mattered most was how much he respected her art and encouraged her ambitions. After 3 years, they got engaged. No one was surprised. I was the first person Hannah called, squealing so loudly I had to hold the phone away. "Emily," he proposed. "You'll be my maid of honor, right? I can't do this without you." It was a crisp December morning, and her voice was bubbling with joy. Of course, I told her, already running through ideas in my head to make her dream day a reality. In the beginning, it was everything I'd hoped. Weekend venue tours, deep dives into color palettes, trendloom boards overflowing with ideas. We were in sync. I took meticulous notes after every conversation to ensure nothing slipped through the cracks. My apartment slowly turned into a wedding planning command center, covered in bridal magazines and fabric swatches. The first red flag came during a family dinner that was supposed to be about budgets. Mom strolled in holding a leather-bound planner I'd never seen before. "I've already placed deposits on the Elridge Manor Hotel," she announced before the salad had even made it to the table. They had one summer date left, so I grabbed it. Hannah looked caught off guard but smiled. "Wow, Mom, that's really generous." But Emily and I were still narrowing down venues. "The Elridge Manor Hotel's booked solid a year in advance," Mom said, patting Hannah's hand and giving me a look that felt like a victory lap. "We're lucky they had a cancellation. I always pictured your wedding there." That was just the beginning. Soon, Mom took over everything from a helpful presence to the full-on commander of the wedding ship. Vendors I'd researched for weeks were tossed aside in favor of her friends' referrals. The palette Hannah and I had picked? Too dull, according to Mom. "It's okay," Hannah said gently when I raised concerns. "Mom's having fun with this, and it does make planning easier. Plus, she and Dad are footing a big part of the bill." So I bit my tongue. I still helped where I could, but the sense of being pushed out was growing by the day. That feeling got worse when our cousin Chloe began popping up in Storgo photos from planning sessions I hadn't been invited to. She'd always hovered on the edge of family gatherings, eager to be part of the inner circle. Now suddenly she was accompanying Hannah and Mom to vendor meetings. In one post, she was holding up color swatches next to bridesmaid dresses, a role I'd assumed was mine as maid of honor. Hannah seems to be spending more time with Chloe lately, I said to my boyfriend Aiden one night as I scrolled through another cake tasting post. Maybe Chloe's just more available right now, he said, always the voice of calm. You've been slammed with work this quarter. I nodded, pushing down the gnawing feeling that this wasn't just about availability. Hannah and I had been each other's anchor for 34 years. A few chaotic months of wedding planning couldn't undo that, could it? But as spring rolled in, I stopped receiving invites to anything wedding-related. When I called to check in, Hannah's responses got shorter and more distracted. Our detailed chats about florals and playlists were now one-line texts. Mom's handling it or already sorted. And yet, I was still financially involved. I'd covered the photographer deposit, the one Hannah adored but Mom said was too pricey. I'd ordered custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests. I was secretly arranging their dream honeymoon, first-class flights to Palawan and a private oceanfront villa. I kept telling myself things would go back to normal once the wedding stress passed. That soon we'd be sipping wine in her new apartment, laughing about Mom's wedding antics. What I didn't realize was how wrong I was, or how fast everything would fall apart in ways I never could have seen coming. The day I found out I hadn't been invited to Hannah's wedding dress appointment felt like a shock I didn't see coming. I didn't hear it from her. It came out casually from my coworker, Rachel, who happened to be friends with the boutique owner. So how was Hannah's dress fitting yesterday? Denise told me she found the perfect one right away. I froze mid-sip, my coffee cup hovering near my mouth. What fitting? I asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel's face shifted instantly, from cheerful to awkward. Oh, it was at Velour, Grace. Denise said your mom, your sister, and your cousin were there for hours, sipping champagne and having a great time. I assumed you went too. I mumbled something about a last-minute work conflict and quickly excused myself to the restroom. There, staring at my own reflection, I tried to process what had just happened. How had I been left out of such a huge milestone in my sister's life? Hannah and I had talked about wedding dress shopping since we were teenagers. We draped pillowcases over our heads, pretending they were veils, and promised to be there for each other when the real day came. That night, I called her, my voice steady but tight. So, how was the dress shopping? There was a pause. Oh, it wasn't really planned, she said. Mom had an appointment already and it just kind of turned into a real shopping trip. Chloe was free, so we needed a third opinion. I could have made time, I said quietly. You could have asked. Emily, please don't turn this into a big thing. There's still a ton of wedding stuff for you to be part of. But that wedding stuff never came. The bridal shower was planned without me. I was asked to chip in for the venue, but not included in the actual planning. Chloe took charge of the bachelorette trip and picked a destination that Hannah had once told me she didn't even like. When I tried to suggest alternatives, things I knew Hannah would love based on 34 years of knowing her, my ideas were brushed off. That's not really Hannah's style anymore, they told me. Still, I kept helping in the background. I finalized every detail of the honeymoon surprise, $9,150 on first-class tickets, a luxury resort, and custom excursions I knew they'd both treasure. I pictured revealing it to her at the rehearsal dinner, imagined her reaction, the hug, and maybe, finally, the reconnection we hadn't had in months. But instead, the space between us only widened. She began canceling our usual Sunday brunches. There was always a new excuse. When we did talk, the conversation felt hollow, like she was reading from a script instead of speaking from the heart. Is everything okay between us? I finally asked, unable to ignore it any longer after 3 weeks of radio silence. Everything's fine, she said quickly. I've just been so busy with the wedding. Mom's been incredible with all the details. Then in May, just 2 months out, I overheard something that stopped me cold. I had gone to the kitchen to refill my glass during a family get-together. From the next room, I heard my name. Emily's always been difficult, my mother's voice carried clearly into the kitchen. Hannah's finally starting to realize it. She always has to be in control, always makes things about her own success. It must be exhausting, Chloe replied, her voice soaked in false sympathy. Especially right now. Hannah should be the focus, not fighting for space. Exactly, Mom said. That's why we've had to limit her involvement. For Hannah's sake. I stood frozen, water pouring over the rim of my glass as their words sank in. My own mother was actively trying to cut me out of my sister's wedding, painting me as some selfish, attention-hungry problem. That night, I finally let my emotions out in front of Aiden. Everything I'd been holding in finally surfaced. What if they don't even want me there? I whispered through tears. What if all this distance is just their way of slowly pushing me out? Aiden pulled me into his arms. His steady calm was the only thing grounding me in that moment. That's not possible, he said softly. You're her sister. You've done nothing but give and support her. But what if Mom's twisted everything? I asked. You've seen how persuasive she can be. Then it's time you talk to Hannah directly, he said, his voice more firm now. No more wondering. No more waiting for things to fix themselves. You need answers. He was right. The silence wasn't protecting me anymore, it was only making things worse. So the next morning I texted Hannah. Need to talk about the wedding and us. Can we meet tomorrow? Her reply didn't come for hours. Super busy with wedding prep. Come by Mom and Dad's Wednesday at 6:30. We'll talk then. Those 5 days felt endless. I went over what I'd say again and again, how I'd speak calmly, express how hurt I was without pointing fingers. I kept reminding myself that maybe Hannah was just caught in the middle. That maybe Mom's influence had clouded things. By the time Thursday arrived, I was a mixture of nervous and hopeful. I just wanted some kind of clarity. Some kind of peace. As I pulled into the driveway of our family's colonial-style home, the air felt heavier than usual, like the calm before a storm. The place where Hannah and I had once drawn hopscotch squares on the concrete now felt unfamiliar. Cold. I checked my reflection in the mirror, smoothed my blouse, and took a deep breath before walking up to the front door. Mom opened it before I even knocked. Her face gave nothing away. We're in the living room, she said flatly, turning and walking off without waiting for me to respond. Inside, it felt like a scene already in progress. Dad sat in his chair, visibly uncomfortable and looking paler than usual. Hannah was on the couch, sitting stiffly with her eyes cast down, nervously twisting her hands. Mom stood behind her like a sentinel, one hand on the back of the sofa. And in the seat that had always been mine during family talks sat Chloe. Her posture was confident, maybe even overly so. What's going on? I asked, still standing since no one had offered me a place to sit. Hannah, I thought we were going to talk, just the two of us. About the wedding. Before Hannah could say a word, Mom cut in. That's why we're all here. There's something you need to understand about the wedding, my mom began. A strange calm settled over me, like the still air before a storm you know is coming. We've been having some discussions, she continued, her voice slipping into that condescending tone she'd mastered over the years. And we've come to the conclusion that your role in the wedding has become problematic. Problematic? I repeated, my eyes locking onto Hannah, who still wouldn't look at me. It's your need to control everything, Mom said, raising her fingers to count. You make everything about yourself. You've overshadowed Hannah's moment with your constant opinions and all that money you keep throwing into the mix. It felt like I had stepped into some warped version of my life, where everything I'd done out of love was being twisted into something selfish. Hannah, I said gently, needing to hear it from her, not from Mom. She finally glanced up, her face torn between guilt and something that looked rehearsed. It's just been really overwhelming, Emily. Every time you get involved, things feel tense. So, Mom thinks that, I said slowly. But what do you think? Before she could answer, Mom stepped forward, subtly positioning herself between us. What Hannah thinks, she said sharply, is that this wedding is supposed to be a joyful time. And honestly, having you there would ruin that. The words landed heavier than I expected, like a chill settling over me. You mean, my presence at the planning? I asked. But Mom just gave a brief smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We've all agreed, she said with emphasis, savoring every syllable, we've decided to keep the guest list more limited. Not as maid of honor. Not as a bridesmaid. Not even as a guest. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the antique clock ticking in the background, louder than usual. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair but stayed quiet. Chloe looked away, at least she had the decency to do that. And Hannah, my sister, my best friend since childhood, said nothing. She just sat there in silence, letting it all unfold. I see, I finally said, surprised by how even my voice sounded. And when exactly did this decision happen? We've been heading in this direction for quite some time, Mom said, clearly mistaking my composure for acceptance. Hannah asked Chloe to be maid of honor weeks ago. We just hadn't made it official. I turned to Chloe. She met my stare with a cool, defiant look. Congratulations, I said flatly. It's not personal, she replied, her tone dripping with insincerity. I nearly laughed. Not personal? I was being pushed out of my sister's wedding and her life, not personal. Hannah, I tried once more, voice breaking just slightly. Is this really what you want? But before she could answer, Mom jumped in. Hannah just wants a wedding without drama. And you've always been too intense, too forceful. You didn't like the venue, you criticized the caterer. That's not fair, I interrupted, my calm starting to slip. I supported every decision, even the ones I had no say in. I gave thousands of dollars without being asked. There it is, Mom said, pointing like she'd caught me in the act. Using your money to manipulate everything. That's exactly why you can't be there. I turned to Dad, silently begging him to speak up. To say anything. He met my eyes for just a moment, then looked away. Of course he did. He always avoided conflict. Even now. And just like that, something inside me stilled. A quiet clarity cutting through the pain. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mess we could clean up over coffee and a heart-to-heart. It was a gradual distancing that had been building for months. Good to know, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked toward the door, moving as if on autopilot. Behind me, I heard Hannah whisper my name. Just once. But she didn't get up. No one followed. No one stopped me. The drive home passed like a dream. Streetlights bled into one another as tears blurred my vision. I had to pull over, twice, just to breathe. My phone buzzed again and again, but I didn't check the messages. I couldn't. When I finally reached my apartment, Aiden was already there. He looked up with a hopeful expression that faded the second he saw my face. What happened? He asked, rushing to pull me into a hug. I leaned into his arms, overwhelmed. Through tears, I told him everything. Holding back tears, I explained what had happened. They can't do this, Aiden said firmly when I was done, his voice tight with anger. You're her sister. You've done everything for her. Apparently none of that matters, I murmured, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. Mom's been turning her against me for months. Little by little, she made it seem like I was the issue. Aiden squeezed my hand, his warmth anchoring me. What are you going to do now? I stared out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. Strangely, I felt a little lighter, like the worst had already happened. Now all that was left was rebuilding. I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. But I know one thing for certain. I deserve better than this. What I didn't realize then was that the events of that night weren't the end of the story. Not even close. What happened that night wasn't the conclusion, it was only the beginning. What followed in the days ahead would show me the full extent of how deeply I was hurt, and eventually an unexpected path to healing. I couldn't sleep at all. I lay awake for hours, replaying everything from the conversation at my parents' house. Every word, every glance, every silence, I analyzed it like a puzzle, trying to find a piece I might have misread. The image of my mother's satisfied expression as she delivered her final words. The way she looked, so composed, almost proud while saying it. By 5:30 a.m., I gave up on trying to sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, a forgotten cup of tea cooling beside me, and started mentally listing every single contribution I had made to Hannah's wedding. The photographer deposit, $2,700. Custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, $950. The string quartet I arranged as a surprise, $1,100. As I kept going, more and more items surfaced, things I had done without recognition or fanfare. The vintage hairpin that matched our grandmother's earrings. The calligrapher I hired when Hannah said she loved hand-letter details. And then, the honeymoon. The ultimate gift. First-class flights to Palawan, $4,500. A private oceanfront villa, $4,000. Special experiences I'd secretly booked, a private cooking class, a sunset cruise, and a guided waterfall trek, $650. All in, I had contributed over $17,400 to a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend. As the sun started to rise, something inside me shifted. I knew what I had to do. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. I decided to take back control of the honeymoon plans. I refunded the full amount to my account and canceled the reservations to prevent further confusion. I sent a short, polite message to the travel agent, letting her know that the plans had changed. All night, my phone had been buzzing with calls and texts. I hadn't looked until now. For missed calls from Hannah. 14 from Mom. Even one from Dad, which was rare. The texts were mostly from Mom, and none of them offered any kind of apology. One read, "You're making this all about you again." Another, "After everything we've done for you." There was no reflection, no ownership, just blame. Then I made one final call to my credit card provider. "Hi, I'd like to ask to review some charges that I didn't directly approve," I said politely. Some expenses were added unexpectedly by family members. Was that fully true? Not exactly. I hadn't authorized all the wedding-related purchases made under my name, like the extra favors and linens my mom insisted on. By 6:45 a.m., I had cut every financial tie I had to the wedding. I emailed my boss asking for a personal day, then turned off my phone completely. The silence that followed was jarring but also freeing. That morning I walked through the city's public gardens trying to make sense of everything. The pain was real. It sat under my ribs like a weight, pressing harder with every breath. How had Hannah let it come to this? We had shared 34 years of memories. Secrets. Laughs. Losses. Wins. And now she sat quietly while Mom cast me out, replacing me with Chloe like I never existed. Around noon, I met my best friend Jenna for lunch. I hadn't planned on telling her everything, but one look at me and she already knew something was deeply wrong. "They did what?" she gasped after I finished explaining loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "Your own mom said that? To your face?" I nodded, barely touching my food, just pushing my fork around the plate. "And Hannah just said nothing?" She tried to speak at one point, I said quietly. But Mom kept talking over her. "And she let her." The words felt heavy in my mouth. Jenna reached across the table and gently held my hand. "Emily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. I didn't want to upset you before, but after this, I think you need to know." My stomach twisted. "What is it?" "Your mom, she's been saying things about you for a while now," Jenna said, hesitating. "At Hannah's engagement party, she told my mom you were jealous of Hannah's happiness." I blinked in disbelief. "And at the Williams dinner last month, she said people were worried you seemed stressed. That everyone was walking on eggshells around you." My jaw dropped. "What? Why would she say that?" "I don't know," Jenna said gently. "But she's been planting little seeds. Comments here and there. Always masked as concern. Just enough to make people question you, without it sounding obvious." I sat there stunned. "She's been turning people against me," I whispered. "Exactly," Jenna said. "She's been trying to gradually reshaping the narrative in her favor." "But why?" I asked, not even sure I expected an answer. "Because she needs to feel in control," Jenna said softly. "You're everything she's not: successful, independent, financially stable. You have your life together in a way she never did. My mom said years ago that your mother always seemed jealous of you." And suddenly it all made sense. The missed invitations to family gatherings. The comments that were always disguised as compliments. "You've done so well without a husband to help you." The way she'd pit Hannah and me against each other by reminding her of tiny childhood grievances, while ignoring all the ways I'd supported her through every chapter of her life. "I've been so blind," I said softly. "No," Jenna replied. "You've just been a daughter who wanted to see the best in her mom. That's not blindness. That's love." By the time I got home that afternoon, something inside me had shifted. I still felt hurt, yes, but I finally had clarity. I turned my phone back on and watched as the flood came in. 31 missed calls in total. Voicemails ranged from Mom's sharp, emotionless voice to Dad's half-hearted attempts at smoothing things over. And then buried among them was one text from Hannah, sent at 2:18 a.m. And it changed everything. "I'm so sorry, Emily. Mom hasn't been fully honest with me for a while. Marcus and I just found out what she did with the honeymoon arrangements. Please call me. I need my sister back." I stared at Hannah's message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button but never pressing it. There was real emotion in her words, raw, honest. But after everything that had happened, the emotional pressure, a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. The other messages that followed painted a picture of complete family chaos. Mom's voicemails started out righteous. "How dare you cancel the honeymoon after saying it was a gift? I'll have to explain things from my perspective." And eventually they shifted into performative peace-offering mode. "We can still fix this if you're willing to apologize." Dad's messages were fewer and more subdued. In one voicemail I could hear traffic in the background. He was clearly calling from his car. "Your mother's very upset. I didn't know anything about this until yesterday. Please call me when you can." Other family members began chiming in too. Uncle Martin, ever loyal to Mom, left me a stern lecture about respecting your parents no matter what. My grandmother left a trembling voice message asking if I was okay, clearly having only heard Mom's version of the story. But then there were some unexpected voices. My Aunt Valerie, Dad's sister, who usually stayed out of the drama, left a voicemail that stopped me cold. "Emily, I've seen your mother do this before. She did the same thing to me with your father. Call me. We need to talk." That's where I decided to start. When I called her back, Valerie's warm voice answered immediately. "Oh, Emily, I've been so worried. Are you okay? Honestly, not really, I admitted. I don't understand any of this. Why would Mom do something like this? Because you intimidate her, Valerie said softly. You always have. Even as a child, you were strong, smart, independent. Elaine has always needed control. When that control slips, she lashes out. She's turning Hannah against me. She banned me from the wedding. Is this normal behavior for her? Valerie sighed. She did the same to me. Your father and I were close growing up. But once he met Elaine, everything changed. She stirred up drama, said I was spreading false stories. By their wedding? I wasn't invited either. I sank into the couch stunned. Dad never told me that. Brian has always chosen peace over conflict, she said. And with Elaine, that meant silence. We reconciled years later, but it was never the same. Her tone softened. But this isn't about me. It's about making sure you don't go through the same thing. Don't let your bond with Hannah be permanently destroyed by this pattern. After that call, I reached out to Sierra, my best friend from college. She's a licensed therapist, and though she couldn't give professional advice, she helped me understand what might be happening. Dysfunctional family roles or dynamics. Triangulation. Golden child versus scapegoat roles. Sierra explained that what I'd experienced wasn't just emotional conflict, it was a deeply ingrained dynamic that shaped my relationship with Hannah from the beginning. The most important thing, she said, was to hold my boundaries while still leaving space for Hannah to find her way back. She's been manipulated too, Sierra reminded me. That doesn't excuse it, but it's important to understand where she's coming from. I was still trying to absorb all of that when my phone rang again. It was Marcus. Emily, thank you for picking up, he said, sounding out of breath. It's been intense here. Hannah's been really upset all day. What's going on? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I wasn't ready to trust just yet. We found out what your mom's been doing. The lies. The misrepresented or manipulated messages. Hannah never knew you were excluded from dress shopping. Your mother told her you canceled last minute. Even showed her texts from you backing out. What? I never sent anything like that. We know that now. Your mom altered or misrepresented some messages. She created misleading screenshots and changed how some messages were received. My stomach turned. The level of emotional pressure was beyond anything I had imagined. But yesterday, at the house, Hannah didn't say anything. She thought that meeting was going to be a reconciliation, Marcus said. Your mom told her you'd been bad-mouthing everyone and that you needed to hear how much pain you'd caused. She didn't expect it to go the way it did. I rubbed my temples, overwhelmed. Why are you the one telling me this? Marcus hesitated. Because she's afraid you'll never speak to her again. And because your mom showed up at our apartment last night. What? My world was spinning. This wasn't just family drama anymore, it was escalating beyond what I expected. I need time, I said. I'm overwhelmed, Marcus. I understand, he replied gently. Just, don't shut her out completely. Hannah loves you. She's just been caught in all this. I didn't make any promises. I just told him I'd be in touch. Not long after I hung up, my work phone rang. It was Denise, the receptionist at my office. Emily, I'm so sorry to bother you, she said nervously. But there's a situation. My heart sank. Your mother came by about 20 minutes ago, Denise said. She seemed upset and asked to speak with you. When I told her you weren't available, she got noticeably emotional. She mentioned something about concerns with financial matters and said she was worried about how much pressure you were under. Denise's voice lowered. Mr. Whitaker is trying to calm things down, but she's getting more and more agitated. I'm on my way, I told her. The 20-minute drive felt like heading into battle. Mom had never once visited my office before. She'd shown little interest in my career beyond how it could benefit the family. Now here she was trying to undermining my credibility and efforts. And I knew deep down this wasn't just about a wedding anymore. I had spent years building my life from the ground up, so when I arrived at the office I saw staff helping my mother leave the building. Her voice carried through the lobby as she expressed frustration and concern. You don't realize how intense her reaction was. She's been acting unpredictably. My face burned with embarrassment as my coworkers looked on, witnessing the scene unravel in real time. Mr. Whitaker, my direct supervisor, walked up with a concerned expression. Emily, he said in a low voice, take whatever time you need to deal with this. Your work speaks for itself. No one's taking those accusations seriously. His words were meant to reassure me, but they couldn't erase the pain of feeling so embarrassed in front of everyone. This wasn't just about wedding drama anymore. My mom was actively trying to dismiss everything I've built, my relationships, my reputation, even my career. As the guards walked her out to the parking lot, her eyes met mine from across the room. There was no remorse in them. No shame. Just cold, simmering anger and something worse, satisfaction. Like she'd taken pleasure in upending my carefully structured world. In that moment, something inside me changed. The part of me that still craved her approval, that child who kept hoping for her love, faded away. I saw her clearly for the first time, not as the nurturing figure I needed, but someone trying to stay in control. This wasn't care. This wasn't what family should be. It was about maintaining control, and I was done with it. When I got home, I made a choice. No more reacting emotionally. No more spiraling. I would confront this calmly with facts. I would meet with Hannah and anyone else involved and lay everything out in the open. I needed to set boundaries that protected my peace, whatever that ended up looking like. Whether or not that meant attending the wedding or staying in contact with my mom remained to be seen. But for the first time, I truly believed I deserved better. And I was ready to stand up for that. 2 days later, I sat at a small table tucked into the corner of a quiet cafe, somewhere halfway between my place and Hannah's. I'd arrived early to settle my nerves, laying out a folder of evidence beside me. Screenshots of texts that proved my version of events. Emails confirming bookings I'd made. Bank statements that showed my financial contributions. When Hannah walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. The usual spark in her eyes was gone. "Thanks for coming," she said softly as she took the seat across from me. "Is Marcus joining us?" I asked. I'd assumed he would be there after our call. "He's just parking the car," she replied. "I wanted a few minutes alone with you first." She set her purse down carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. "Emily." I don't even know where to begin. I gave her a moment, letting her collect her thoughts. Nothing about this situation had unfolded the way I expected, so I didn't push. "I believed her," she said finally, her voice cracking. "All these months, Mom's been showing me messages, texts she claimed were from you. Saying you didn't care, that you thought my wedding plans were tacky, that your job was too important to be bothered." Tears started to roll down her cheeks. I believed her because it was easier than believing our mom would lie to me. And lie so completely. "She showed you edited messages?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around the depth of the emotional pressure. Hannah nodded and pulled out her phone. "Marcus figured it out. Look." She opened her messaging app and scrolled through conversations that were supposedly from me. But the tone was all wrong, sarcastic, dismissive. Not my voice at all. Still, they came from a number labeled with my name. "She had access to my phone," Hannah said. "She made a new contact her number, but under your name. So when I thought I was texting you, I was actually texting her. And she'd reply pretending to be you." She wiped her eyes. "She even deleted real messages from you. I never saw half of what you actually sent." I sat back, stunned by the sheer planning behind it all. "But what about when we saw each other? Didn't something feel off?" "We barely saw each other these last few months," she said. "Mom always had a reason why you couldn't make it to wedding events. And when we did see you, she was there too, guiding the conversation, twisting everything you said afterward to make you sound selfish or cold." Just then, Marcus approached the table, carrying 3 coffees. He set them down and sat beside Hannah. "She influenced everything in a damaging way," Hannah whispered. "I'm so sorry," Emily, Marcus said, his tone heavy. "I should have caught on sooner." "How did you figure it out?" I asked. "It was the honeymoon," he explained. "That's when everything started falling apart." Hannah got an alert about a cancellation, but she didn't even know there was a honeymoon booked to Palawan. "Mom said you had planned it as a gift," Hannah added, "but then canceled it out of spite when you weren't invited to the wedding." "But that made no sense," Marcus continued. "Why would you spend that kind of money if you were supposedly bitter and distant?" So we started digging. They checked phone records. Compared message timestamps. The inconsistencies piled up fast. "And then we found it," he said. "On your mom's tablet. A folder of edited conversations she had prepared or rearranged. Probably to keep her lies straight." I slid my own folder across the table. I brought proof too. Bank records, original emails, everything. As they flipped through the documents, their expressions shifted, shock giving way to disbelief, then to anger. The difference between what I'd actually done and the version of me my mother had painted was night and day. "That day at your parents' place," Marcus said, "Hannah thought we were there to clear things up. She had no idea your mom planned to cut you out completely." I froze, Hannah whispered, guilt flooding her voice. When she started saying all those awful things, claiming we'd agreed, I didn't know what to do. By the time I realized what was happening, you were already gone. She reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Emily, I never agreed to shut you out. Never. You're my sister. My best friend. I can't get married without you there. The validation hit harder than I expected. For months, I've been made to question everything, my memories, my instincts, even my place in my own family. To finally have someone acknowledge what I'd endured sent a wave of emotion rushing through me. Once I found my voice again, I said quietly, we need to talk about Mom. This isn't just difficult behavior, this is deliberate. It's calculated emotional pressure. It actually gets worse, Marcus said, his tone grim. After you left that night, Hannah confronted her. What she said, the way she changed, it was like watching a completely different person take over. Hannah gave a small nod. She admitted everything, she said softly. But she didn't apologize. Not once. She said she was protecting me from your toxic influence. And when I said I wanted you back in the wedding, she continued, she said she might withdraw her help if things didn't go her way and tell everyone I was having some kind of pre-wedding mental breakdown. I exhaled sharply. Just like the rumors she's been spreading about me. Exactly, Marcus said. It's a pattern. She does this anytime someone pushes back against her. We spent the next hour piecing together the full scope of what had happened, everything from the altered text messages and redirected invitations to the gossip she'd seeded in our community, to the subtle ways she used money to keep people in line. Each new revelation added another layer to the bigger picture, a clear and consistent history of emotional pressure that stretched back decades. I've scheduled a meeting, I said at last. Dad, Aunt Valerie, a few others who need to know what's really going on. We're meeting tomorrow evening. More like a neutral intervention than a confrontation. Will you come? I asked Hannah. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. It's time everyone heard the truth. The next evening, we gathered in Aunt Valerie's cozy living room. I sat beside Hannah and Marcus, while Dad, Uncle Gregory, and our grandmother Evelyn took the other seats. Evelyn had asked to be present after getting some troubling phone calls from Mom. When it was time, I laid out everything methodically, no emotion, just facts. The altered conversations. The record of transactions. Personal observations from people who knew her. Aunt Valerie added her own perspective, sharing memories of similar situations from years ago. Marcus described the outbursts my mother had at their apartment. With each new piece of information, the room grew quieter. My father sat still for most of it, his expression going paler with every detail. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. I knew some of it, he said. Not all this, but enough that I should have acted a long time ago. He looked at me, regret carved into every line on his face. I chose to keep the peace instead of protecting you. I'm sorry, Emily. I should have done better. Mom arrived last, under the impression this was just a conversation about wedding expenses. She walked in confidently, but that confidence flickered the moment she saw the circle of family and the pile of printed evidence waiting for her. What is this? She demanded, eyes scanning the room. A chance to tell the truth, I said calmly. What followed wasn't surprising, but it still hurt. She denied everything at first. Accused us all of conspiring against her. Tried the usual tactics, playing the victim, shifting blame, calling out loyalty. When that didn't work, the anger surfaced, distant at first, then increasingly intense and emotional. And finally, when nothing else gained traction, came the tears. She insisted we misunderstood her. That she only ever meant well. That this was all about love. But no one moved. No one came to her defense. I won't be treated like this, she snapped. After all I've done for this family, for Hannah's wedding. About the wedding, Hannah cut in, standing to face her. Emily is my maid of honor. That was always my choice. And if you can't respect that, or her, your role in this wedding and in our lives will be very limited. Our mother looked stunned. You're choosing her over your own mother? I'm choosing honesty over control, Hannah said firmly. I'm choosing healing over hurt. Mom turned sharply to Dad, clearly expecting backup. But for once he didn't fold. Elaine, he said, his voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. Enough. Look at what you've done. Look at the proof. This ends now. The meeting didn't end with closure. Mom left abruptly, visibly upset, and warned us that we'd regret turning against her. But something had shifted, something lasting. Her tactics had been named, exposed, and finally rejected by the people she used them against. We still had a long road ahead, family wounds, strained wedding plans, but for the first time, it felt like we were all moving in the same direction. Toward honesty. toward something healthier. The week leading up to Hannah's wedding felt different. There was a new, if fragile, kind of peace settling in among us. After the intervention, Mom cycled through her usual tactics: cold silence, dramatic apologies, harsh accusations, but eventually landed on a stiff, reluctant acknowledgement of the boundaries we had set. To everyone's surprise, Dad held firm. He stood by Hannah's decision to name me maid of honor. After years of backing down to avoid conflict, it was like he had found strength he didn't know he had. During a quiet moment on my balcony one evening, he turned to me and said, "I should have protected you both a long time ago." The city lights shimmered far beneath us as I sat there, convincing myself that staying silent was the same as keeping the peace. But I was wrong. "Why now, Dad?" I asked quietly. "What changed?" He didn't respond right away, just stared into his coffee as if it held all the answers. Seeing it laid out like this, the intentional choices, the hidden truth, I couldn't deny it anymore. "To be honest, Emily, I'm just tired," he finally said. "Tired of tiptoeing around, tired of acting like everything's okay when it's not." There was something both unsettling and comforting in his openness. This version of my father, willing to face hard truths, willing to change, gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, real change was possible. Hannah and I had been slowly piecing our relationship back together. The connection was still tender, still healing, but it wasn't gone. We spent hours talking through all the emotional pressure that had driven a wedge between us, mourning the time we'd lost as sisters. I keep wondering what would have happened if Marcus hadn't uncovered those misrepresented or manipulated messages. She admitted during one of our brunches, now a tradition we'd revived. "Let's not go down that road," I replied gently, giving her hand a squeeze across the table. "We're here now." As for Mom, the family had drawn a clear line. She could attend the wedding, but her role would be strictly limited. No more secret vendor meetings. No more decisions made in the shadows. And absolutely no isolating or influencing others behind closed doors. "And if I don't agree to those terms," she'd asked, her tone dripping with disdain, "then you're welcome to come as a guest," Hannah had answered, calm but firm. "But you won't be involved in any part of the ceremony or reception planning." Surprisingly, Mom had said yes. Though the way she carried herself made it obvious, this was more about control than growth. I caught flashes of resentment in her eyes, quickly covered by 4 smiles. As for me, this whole experience changed something deep inside. The pain I'd felt early on had slowly been replaced with clarity. Patterns I had accepted for years finally came into focus. Working with a therapist who focused on complex family dynamics, I began recognizing how my own tendencies to over-accommodate had made me an easy target for control. Your value doesn't come from what you give others, Dr. Pennington reminded me during one particularly rough session. Not emotionally, not financially, not through labor. Those words became my compass as the final weeks of wedding prep unfolded. I resumed my role as maid of honor, but with clearer boundaries. I helped organize the bridesmaids and handled last-minute logistics. But I wasn't about to drain my bank account or my emotional reserves to keep the peace. I also rebooked a revised version of the honeymoon trip for Hannah and Marcus. Still thoughtful, still generous, but much more aligned with what I could truly give. "This is a gift," I told them, handing over the updated itinerary. No strings attached. It's not a trade for approval or affection. The big day arrived under a bright, cloudless sky, a welcome contrast to the emotional roller coaster we'd all ridden. The ceremony was set for 3 p.m. at the hotel. The morning was filled with hair appointments, steamers, makeup brushes, and a surprising calm. To her credit, Mom stuck to the boundaries we'd set. Though I could tell it took real effort, she kept things civil. Her conversations with me were brief but courteous. Mostly, she focused on her, mother of the bride, role for the crowd, helping Hannah into her gown, the one I hadn't seen until that moment. I felt a pang of sadness for what this day could have been if things had been different. Hannah caught my expression in the mirror. "I wish we could undo everything that happened these past few months," she whispered. "I don't," I said without thinking. It hurt, but it brought the truth out. "Now we can rebuild something real." She turned to me, glowing in delicate ivory lace. "When did my big sister get so wise?" I smiled as I adjusted her veil. Probably around the same time my little sister found her courage. The ceremony went off beautifully. I stood beside Hannah, holding her bouquet as she and Marcus exchanged heartfelt vows. In the front row, Mom sat beside Dad, perfectly composed. She glanced my way from time to time, her expression impossible to read, but the most surprising moment came later, during the reception, while everyone enjoyed cocktails and appetizers. I was straightening cards near the gift table when I heard her voice behind me. "The calligraphy's beautiful." "That was you, wasn't it?" I turned, bracing myself for one of her usual backhanded compliments. But to my surprise, her expression was sincere. Yes, I said simply. Hannah mentioned she loves hand-lettered things. Mom nodded, the silence between us thick with unsaid things. Then, more quietly, she added, you've always noticed those little details, what people care about, what makes them feel seen. I never had that skill. Her words, simple but honest, caught me completely off guard. I've started seeing the therapist Valerie recommended, she went on, eyes focused somewhere past me. She says I need to learn how to acknowledge other people's strengths without feeling smaller myself. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Apparently, I've got a lot to work on. You're in therapy? I asked, not hiding my shock. Your father insisted after everything that happened. She hesitated, then straightened up. I'm not expecting everything between us to magically heal. I know it'll take time, if it even happens at all. But I want to try. It wasn't a full apology. And it wasn't a total breakthrough. But it was something, a crack in the wall she'd built over the years. And for that day, it was enough. A month after the wedding, our family started attending group therapy. At first, Mom showed up begrudgingly. But little by little, she began to engage. The structure gave her a safer space to voice things without resorting to old habits. Dad slowly found his voice too, finally saying things he'd kept buried for years. Hannah and I grew stronger as well. Our bond now rested on honesty and mutual respect, not codependency. My own growth didn't stop there. I kept going to therapy, kept working on myself. I learned how to draw firmer lines, not just with family, but in every relationship, and I finally began to understand the difference between helping out of love and losing myself in the process. But perhaps the biggest shift was internal. I finally started to see my own value, separate from what I could give or do for everyone else. Throughout everything, Aiden had been my steady ground. His support never wavered, even when things got messy. 8 months after Hannah's wedding, he took me on a weekend hike to our favorite mountain overlook. That's where he asked me to marry him. Yes, I said instantly without a doubt. But I added one condition. He tilted his head, curious. We planned this wedding on our terms. Just us. Small circle, clear boundaries. No drama. His laugh rang out, echoing through the valley. Deal. Life continued to unfold from there. Mom's growth came in waves, some days marked by sincere effort, others by slipping back into familiar patterns. But at least she was trying. Dad, for his part, seemed renewed. He began speaking up more, exploring long-buried interests and rekindling parts of himself that had been quiet for years. Hannah and Marcus welcomed a daughter. They gave her my name, Emily, as her middle name. The first time I held her, I couldn't stop the tears. And through it all, I learned a truth that changed everything. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're the ground where love can grow in a healthier way. And valuing yourself, really standing in your own worth, isn't selfish. It's necessary. The road from that difficult night, when Mom looked me in the eye and said, we've all agreed we've decided to keep the guest list more limited, to where I am today wasn't smooth or simple. It took courage to face some ugly realities. It took clarity to see which relationships were healthy and which ones weren't. And it took real strength to ask for the respect I'd long deserved. If you're going through something similar, feeling left out, facing hard choices with family, please hear this. Setting boundaries might be the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it might also be the very thing that sets you free. Your value isn't measured by whether others can see it. And sometimes, when it feels like reconciliation is out of reach, that moment becomes the first step towards something more honest, more healing. If this story spoke to you, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family? What helped you hold on to your self-worth when others didn't see it? Share your story in the comments because someone out there might really need to hear it. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for listening, and remember, your story matters too.